Well, hello and welcome to Tiny Changes Big Shift podcast. And my guests today are Connor Joy and Brock Faucette. And why don't you two introduce yourselves? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're up to, and if you have any program or coaching that you would like to promote today, put it on the table.
Connor, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. So as Vicky said, I'm Connor. I don't know. What should I say about myself? My profession is I'm a recruiter. That takes up a lot of my life. And I really enjoy it. But yeah, I live out here in Denver, Colorado. I love it out here. I recently moved out here last year. And what else? What else about me? Originally from Maryland, good old East Coast. But as for like you asked, Vicky, as for like things that I would recommend or throw out there, redesign training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big part of my life, and I consistently volunteer with them and coach through that program, and I absolutely love it, and it's really transformed my life for the good. And yeah, and I don't see myself really stopping anytime soon with them, so that's a big part of my life. And yeah, if you're ever interested, definitely take a look at redesign trainings. Great. So that's me.
Thank you, Connor.
Yeah.
Brock.
I strategically asked Connor to go first because nothing terrifies me more than having to talk about myself. So yeah, my name is Brock, and I've worked in communications for quite some time. For the last 9 years or so, I worked at a volunteer membership association for professionals. And I recently switched over to working essentially in communications for a startup that is centered around upskilling. So, so after 9 years, I've moved to a new organization, and it's a huge shift, and I'm loving it. So that's me professionally, and your listeners who may not know us, Connor and I used to date. So that's why I imagine that you invited us together onto your wonderful podcast.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say yes. Connor was endorsing redesign trainings, which the three of us have those trainings in common, those transformational workshops in common. Yeah. So yeah, I highly recommend those as well. But go ahead, Vicky. Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. I know that your relationship has evolved and ebbed and flow. Is there anything you feel comfortable about sharing about that?
Yeah, I'm here to share anything and everything is in terms of how it has evolved. I'll say that Connor and I dated romantically for 4 years, and were at one point engaged, and we shifted out of that. And we shifted out of that in a very emotional and strange time. The pandemic was very new in our lives, and Connor and I were living together, and we decided to call off the engagement. Yet we continued isolating together because of the pandemic. So, as you can imagine, there were challenges, but I do think that ultimately, we're here today very much in a loving way, because we were able to navigate those times. And I don't know if Connor agrees, but I feel that our relationship is stronger now than it ever has been. Even though we're hundreds and hundreds of miles away from one another, we're still incredibly connected. So I don't want to speak for Connor, but that's my elevator pitch on our relationship.
Yeah, the pandemic really put us in an incubator for all sorts of experiences together. And yeah, I completely agree. I think it was, it shouldn't have happened any other way. And it got us to a place now where, I agree. I think it is the healthiest relationship we've had in the 4 or 5 years that we've known each other.
Yeah.
I'm super grateful for that. And I don't see that changing anytime soon either.
I expect communication was really critical for you during all of these transitions. And if you think about your central relationship is with yourself first, how do you think that played into how you communicate with each other?
Yeah, communication. Wow. It's funny because that's my profession. And I feel as though my relationship with Connor has been a next level education for me. And well, no, I'm saying that it really illuminated for me how there's a meme going around the internet, and I think that it is perfect for me. And the meme shows a three-headed dragon, and one of the heads is like how eloquent I am when I'm writing. The other one is how eloquent I am when I am thinking. And the other one is what a disaster I am when I try to articulate myself. And I feel that really summarizes me. And I feel like that summarizes who I was in my relationship with Connor. So I think over our time together, we really learned to understand one another. And I don't like someone else was talking. Actually, someone a peer that we all know and love called me once and asked for tips about how she and her partner have recently split and they're trying to remain friends. So she called me for advice and I was really flattered. But of course, like we're all very different people, and I can offer some advice, but it may not work given that people are just like, really nuanced, right? But I will say that something I mentioned in that conversation is that Connor and I had a very long and sometimes uncomfortable car ride. We were going up to North Carolina from Atlanta, Georgia, where we were living at the time together. So we were cloistered in a very small car for 6 hours. And I don't even know if Connor remembers this, but during that trip, there were moments of like just being joyful. There were some dark moments. And I remember we arrived at our destination and we were in the parking lot. And I really think that conversation in the parking lot was the turning point in what our relationship has become. And what happened there, what transpired there was that we got real with each other. And despite our 4 years of being together, I feel that was the rawest and the realest that we had been up until that point. And I really do think that was a turning point for us. So I think that's a really good way for us or direction for us to kind of take whatever this conversation turns into is like being raw and real. So Connor, do you remember that conversation that I'm talking about?
I actually don't.
I was scared you would take. Well, I remember we got in a very heated discussion around Greensboro, but we kept driving and then we parked at our friend Nancy's.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And we stayed in that parking lot, not getting out for some time. Just, I think, really getting everything off our shoulders that had been on our shoulders. Well, me specifically, because I'm a person who listens and rarely speaks, which I know is surprising to you and your listeners now because I'm doing nothing but speaking. But this is not normal. This is not normally who I am. So actually, I'll pause and I'll let Connor and you speak.
Yeah, no, it's not. And like in that experience with you, the one you're bringing up, I remember. I think I remember saying like, I'm not leaving the car until I get this out. And I don't want you to leave either. So when we think about communication, I think about me being direct, of course, being authentic, but yeah, in that moment, I wasn't willing to leave that car unless things were made clear, and yeah, to where we could like take the next step in our relationship, where we both had understandable, I guess, expectations of what was next. But yeah, that was a fun experience. It was definitely lots of ups and downs. It wasn't just like hard and dark, like you said, the entire time. It wasn't like pulling teeth, because there were moments there in that conversation where we were both willing to laugh, willing to see the ridiculousness in the way that we think or interpret, right? Or interpret like what the other person is saying. So I thought that was, even in and of itself, like maybe that's even like a nugget of like something profound, and not taking things like so seriously to the point where like you think you're going to like die, from losing out on something. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense or not.
What I hear you both saying is that you were honest, but you were deeply committed. And even though it was uncomfortable and messy, you were committed to hanging in there together. And I think that's very moving and touching, because I think often people think when it gets hard, okay, I'm just going to quit. I'm just going to throw up my hands and walk away. And I can feel justified with that, because you are being so difficult. And it sounds like you also kept bringing it back to yourself, each of you, saying, this is what I need to clear, not this is what you did wrong. And maybe there was some of that in there, because it always does get messy, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did. I think in that conversation specifically, like I said earlier, in my mind, that was a turning point. At least it was for me. And I feel that it was the first time that I had successfully cleared things off so that I could start from a clean slate. Which is not to say that immediately after that, everything was roses and daffodils. That's not what I'm saying. But I do feel like that conversation that we had was real, raw, authentic. It was loud, not going to lie. It was loud, but it also came from love and definitely, like you said earlier, a commitment.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think sometimes, myself included, we don't like messy, and I can tend to judge myself. You read guidance on communication, it'll say, make I statements. I feel this when you do that, and be specific about, all of that. But in real life, there's emotions involved. It gets a little charged.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's kind of an aphorism that floats around. I hear it all the time, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. And it's that, the best communicators listen. And I totally get the sentiment there. And I challenge that a bit, because as Connor knows, I'm a fantastic listener. When I listen, however, and that is essentially the bulk of what I do, I really lose myself and my boundaries and my desires in that conversation. So I think that, as with almost anything I can fathom, balance is key. And I've gotten to a place with Connor where, we had a phone conversation earlier today, and I jokingly like jumped in and said, "Oh, so do you want to hear about my life now?" And I can have fun with him and be playful with him in that, because I know that if I don't jump in, I just will be lost in the conversation. And I think that finding that balance and striking that balance is essential to being in a successful relationship, whether it's with your partner, your friend, or your coworkers, like across the board.
I like what you're saying. Instead of holding back and relying on a skill you're comfortable with, which is your listening skill, you're starting to step forward and lean into something that in the past wasn't so comfortable and showing up different.
Yeah.
How do you experience that, Connor?
Yeah. Yeah. When I think about Brock kind of talking about his skill of listening, I feel like I am on the opposite spectrum where I like to talk and I like to, hey, I like to hear myself talk too. But I mean that in a way that like I think and I process externally. And I know that this has been a conversation Brock and I have had before where, yeah, like I know this about myself. I know that I like to express myself through orating, right? Whereas I know other people, express themselves differently. But I think Brock's right. I mean, yeah, finding a harmony between, knowing when to speak up for yourself, and when to listen. And there have been moments in my relationship and in these discussions with Brock about our relationship where I have kind of sat there and realized that I've talked, I've taken up so much time, and I realized that I haven't, I still don't know where Brock is. Like I have no idea. I'm clueless really as to like what he's thinking or what he's feeling. So yeah, I mean, it does take a self-awareness to like check in and say, like, am I like completely understanding of this other person in front of me? So yeah, I don't know. Is that it?
Yeah, thank you. I would think that with hard feelings like the messy you described, that forgiveness had to play in at some point. And whether that was clearing the slate, like you said, but also letting go of feelings of hurt, frustration, all of that. How do you approach that?
I know for me, I mean, this really only goes for, my experience in my relationship with Brock, but thinking about forgiveness, there's a part of me that kind of always knows that, Brock has always been a forgiving person, naturally. So I think really it has more to do with forgiving myself, for the, actions and, just forgiving myself throughout the process. And I will be honest. I mean, it's not, the act or the beingness of forgiving is something that doesn't necessarily dissipate, after saying I've forgiven myself. It's a process, and it's a healing process, and it's a continual commitment to being forgiving of oneself. Which is something that I'm still exploring, and something that I'm very much in like deep, meditation about. So I don't know. What about you, Brock?
Well, I listened to one of your previous podcast episodes, and it was all about forgiveness. And forgive me, I cannot remember the guest, but
Elizabeth.
Yeah. Oh, that's right, Elizabeth. Props to her, because forgiveness is forgiving, right? You give forgiveness to a person, and it's really a gift to yourself. I mean, she said it much more eloquently than that, but yeah, I feel ultimately I had very little to forgive Connor for. And I feel, hopefully he doesn't feel as though, hopefully he hasn't felt the need to forgive me for things. I do agree with Connor that the most difficult person to forgive in our lives is ourselves. At least that's been my experience. And, you know, I think each of us, you know, in this conversation, we're all on our journeys, right? Trying to be our best selves. And something that I've realized recently is that I'm a results person and not a process person. And that can be challenging when, you know, working on yourself is not something that's ever done, right? It's an ongoing process. I'll be working on myself till the day that I die, right? So being gentle with myself, being gentle with others, right? Because and really shifting from being result oriented, thinking that at some point I'm going to be finished working on myself, shifting from that to actually enjoying the process. So yeah, so that's something that I've been working on. And part of that work is being a better verbal communicator and being clear, being authentic, and having boundaries, which is essential. So yeah, that's where I am.
I'm coming to that boundaries are essentially agreements that we make.
Mm.
And they come from being clear also and showing up and being willing to say, this is what I would like, or this is what I'd need. It seems like it should be so easy, and it seems like that sometimes is so hard. Well, why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, I want to jump in and say that I love what you said, because Connor and I have had conversations about this too. When we first split, yet we were still cohabitating, we decided to talk about, you know, kind of the rules of engagement, right? Now that we are working
That
on
sounds military.
Yeah, the rules of disengagement, I guess, but excuse me. But we started talking about, like, how are we going to, what are the boundaries and so on. And something that I told him is I don't want to think about these things as boundaries. I want to think of them as agreements, or because I want to think about what we are okay to do rather than what we're not, what we're like not okay not happening, you know. So really shifting from what's possible rather than, you know, these are my non-negotiable, you can't do this, you can't do that. Let's talk about what we can do. And I think that was a healthy way for us to proceed with, like, what was next for us in our relationship.
It sounds so much more respectful and open than protective and defensive when you say, what can we do versus what can't we do? I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really do think it made all of the difference. And I mean, yeah, like if I think about an example, one of the things that once I was given that context, you know, in which to create agreements with Brock, you know, I thought about it, you know, I gave it some thought and came back and was like, one of the things that I want is to spend time with you, you know, one-on-one. Like I want to spend time with you, you know, connecting still. I mean, yes, we were living together, so like it was kind of hard not to be separate. But we were also creating separation, you know, throughout that time so that we could have our own alone time, right? But I wanted to make it a, you know, like an intentional thing to where we could connect and do something new or different together. And that not only does it, you know, create a space of openness, but it really did create a space of excitement for me. Like it created a space of creativity. Like I could think of, you know, my brain just started running and all these things that we could do. And yeah, excitement. And it's kind of funny, like, you know, thinking about that in our relationship there towards the end. in my experience, and I think Brock would probably agree, things were not very exciting. And yeah, so I mean, I think that really did create a context shift for us. Yeah, it made all the difference.
And I want to I want to emphasize the fact that we were isolating together during a pandemic, and like having just split off our engagement, and we were in a condo that's maybe 1,000 square feet, right in the heart of Atlanta. Yeah, so I mean, tight quarters, one bedroom. I'll emphasize that as well. And so yeah, I mean, and it wasn't always easy, but I think by and large we did a great job, and it all came down to communication. And something else that I'll mention is that, we had agreements in the beginning, and as as the weeks went on, we revisited those agreements, because something that I think both of us realized is that some of those agreements were created from a place of hurt, created from a place of anger, right? And so as our relationship evolved in the new way, we realized those agreements didn't even make sense, or they just didn't work. So we revisited those, and we renegotiated those agreements based on who we were then, right? So I think that was key to kind of the evolution of our relationship as well.
We're coming up on time to close up the show, but I want to thank both of you for being so open and honest about how things evolved with you. And I want to reflect that I see tremendous strength and love between the two of you. And I think this experience, if you could say what you received personally for being willing to walk through this in this way, because a lot of people don't. They point the finger, they blame, they throw up their hands, and they say, "You did this to me." So what would you think you gained personally from being willing to do it different?
That's a great question.
Well, I'll jump in
Go ahead.
and allow Connor some time to think, because I think what I've learned in my relationship with Connor has impacted my entire life. When I think about those fledgling, or those early days when he and I first split, and just who I was being, and like the lack of worthiness I felt for myself, I really feel that as my relationship evolved with Connor in the new way, I developed, and it's still, like I said, it's a work in progress and always will be, but I developed a new understanding of my worth, a new understanding of, like my value system. And because of that, I accessed courage. I quit a job that was kind of, killing me emotionally and spiritually, like really, really, like I quit a job, which I think, to pat myself on the back, took a lot of courage. I'd been there for 9 years, but, I was working crazy hours, as Connor can attest. I loved my colleagues, but it was a nightmare of a job at times. But because of my relationship with Connor and the things I learned about myself through him, and like by his side, I've evolved in so many ways that has informed the way I operate in every other aspect of my life. And because of that, I have a job now. I work fewer hours. I make a lot more money. And I think that has a lot to do with agreements that I made with myself, right? Agreements that, this is what I stand for in my life. This is who I get to be to have this happen. And so, yeah, I cherish Connor and our relationship the way it was, the way it is, the way it will be in the future, because I really feel like what I've learned in this experience has impacted virtually every aspect, if not every aspect of my life.
Connor?
Yeah. I don't like usually giving the same answer, but yeah, it's I think it has a lot to do with worth. Yeah, and experiencing that on a personal level, and how that has permeated, into the rest of my life, and it permeated in a way that's like allowed me to see what's really possible for my life. Not just in a relationship, but in relationship with myself, in relationship with my career, in relationship with my parents. And that too, I think it's allowed me to, see possibilities in relationship with other people. And what that looks like. And like Brock said, like knowing, if I can create agreements with somebody who, with a relationship that broke up, right? And it turned into something like this, where, I experience love and support and connection with him, then damn it, I can do that with anybody else. And I won't settle. I really won't settle until, I've created that again. And that is so liberating to say. And so it like, not only does it create a sense of worth, but it creates a profound joy for me. Yeah. And, I mean, I can say today, like, I feel like if I were to assess my life now, I really do experience joy and happiness, more times than not. So, yeah.
Thank you both for being here. And I want to say to our listeners that if you heard a little youngster in the background, she was being put to bed. And this is real life, real happenings. And probably some of our listeners have youngsters they put to bed. And I do want to, again, define or comment on the redesign training. If the listeners are interested in that, because I know that a lot of what you've been able to accomplish together has also come from participating in that training, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
So listeners can find that at healing-angels.org, redesign. And for my guests, thank you so much for being here and for listening. And you can find me at vickydon.com. Thank you, Brock. Thank you, Connor. I appreciate so much.
For you.
Love you too.
Yes, love you.
Thank you, Vicky. Appreciate you.
I'm going to stop the broadcast.